Sonic and the Black Knight is a game that, even before its release, was already being unfairly bashed. I believe the bashing was the result of two main things. The first thing is that Sonic and the Black Knight is the next installment in what's being called the Sonic Storybook series. The series seems to be disliked by many people for reasons I don't fully understand. The second thing is that this time Sega went with a different sort of gimmick, and people seem to dislike that, but I don't feel that's really fair to the game, and I really think people would have given this game a chance rather than immediately bashing it based on appearances. Before we get into the actual gameplay aspects, let's discuss the story real quick. The story is very similar to Secret Rings, in which Sonic gets sucked into a storybook environment. The only difference this time is that the environment is set in medieval Europe, in the land of King Arthur, rather than the Arabian Nights. Which I suppose works, since you're going with the storybook series, you might as well pick one of the most famous tales in the history of literature. But the plot goes a bit deeper than just Sonic getting sucked into a random storybook. There's a wizard named Merlina who is the granddaughter of Merlin, and she's on the run from who, at the time, you believe is King Arthur. And he seems to have become corrupt, and is chasing her down for reasons you don't fully understand until later in the game. During this sequence that Merlina is running from King Arthur is when she decides to summon someone she calls the Hero of Wind, who turns out to be Sonic. He saves her, and, well, that's where the story goes from there. Merlina explains that she needs Sonic's help in order to stop the now corrupt King Arthur, and to do it Sonic needs a special sword called Caliburn. Caliburn turns out to be a talking sword, which sounds stupid, but Caliburn's personality actually becomes more apparent as the game goes on, and it's somewhat amusing to see him and Sonic butt heads during the progression of the game. One thing I will say about the plot is that about 3/4 of the way in, the game takes one of the most ridiculous plot twists that I've ever seen in a game. By ridiculous, I don't mean it was absurd or, you know, a bad twist. I mean it was a really good twist that, I'll be honest, I didn't fucking see coming. It really did catch me off guard, and I was very, very happy with it, because suddenly the plot became awesome and the game actually got me really pumped, which is something Secret Rings also did at one point during the game. In addition to the new characters, there are some other characters from the story that are being played by the original Sonic characters. For example, some of King Arthur's knights are being played by Knuckles, Shadow, and Blaze. All good choices, but the characters really don't look very appealing or legit in the armor they're wearing. They just look very strange. But you can look past it, I suppose. Also, the Lady of the Lake is in the story, much like the original King Arthur, but she's being played by... Okay, I understand this really isn't too big a deal, but was there any particular reason why they couldn't have used Tikal? I mean, in the original Sonic Adventure game, Tikal was a mystical lady who came to help the characters in that story. She would fit the role of Lady of the Lake perfectly. I don't understand why, and while I like Amy as a character, she does not fit the Lady of the Lake at all, but whatever, it's a minor issue. There's also a blacksmith played by Tails. A good role for Tails. Blacksmith actually doesn't really play too big a role in the story, but he's the one who runs the shop. Now, the shop consists of three main things. Number one, it allows you to select your style of play. There are several different styles, and I believe you can unlock other styles later in the game. There's also a section where you can equip various items to your characters. I'll explain how you get the items later on. There's also a section where you can create various weapons, which is kind of cool, but the problem is I think they're asking a bit too much when it comes to creating these weapons. Some of the items you need a lot of. One minor note, there's a musical tune playing in the blacksmith shop, and it's actually a violin rendition of Tails' theme from the original Sonic Adventure games. That being said, in the game, there's a art section that's a collection of fan art from various fans from around the world, which is really nice, and during it, there's a violin rendition of Doesn't Matter from the original Sonic Adventure games. Alright, now that we got the minor stuff out of the way, let's talk about the actual gameplay. First off, I think the game looks pretty good. The graphics aren't half bad. I've seen a bit better on the Wii, but I've definitely seen way worse, so the graphics are decent. As for the actual game, well, it's much like Secret Rings, only you use both the Wiimote and the nunchuck. You control Sonic's direction and movement with the nunchuck, and you use the Wiimote to swing. It actually does work really well. The only real problem is that there are going to be a lot of enemies to face. That being said, you're going to be swinging the Wiimote a lot. This is the only Wii game that has ever given me a wrist cramp. You can get used to it after a while, but I really think they should have dumbed down the number of enemies to face. It does take away from the game just a little bit, and messes up the flow of speed. There are specific attacks you can do and combos you can use, but because all of these are controlled with the Wii Motion, the gameplay is probably going to boil down to you just randomly waving around the Wiimote while Sonic swings the sword. The game is, by nature, a waggle fest. But at the same time, surprisingly, it's actually a lot of fun to play. It's fast-paced, action-oriented, and enjoyable. I mentioned the items earlier. You get to select the items at the end of every stage, but you only have a certain amount of points in order to choose the items, so you have to choose wisely as to what you want and what you don't. It's not a bad feature, but I do find it mildly irritating and unnecessary. There's only a handful of boss fights in the game. They're okay, but I don't think they're as good as the ones in Unleashed, and they tend to be a bit chaotic and once again boil down to you just waving the Wiimote around like an idiot. But they're okay. One other thing I really like about this game is that you don't have to play as just Sonic. You can choose to play as the other knights if you want to later on in the game. This is pretty cool, and every knight is designed pretty well. Each one has their own unique gameplay style, but they all work. The only one I feel the need to mention is Gawain, Knuckles, because he can fly over all the enemies. To be fair, you might not want to be doing this because it'll ruin your score at the end of the level, but if you're just playing through the level for speed, it does make the level way too easy. There's a couple extra features I want to mention real quick. There is Wi-Fi in this game, but it's not what we wanted nor what we expected. The items that you can get from the game, you can actually trade with your friends over Wi-Fi, which is pretty cool. There's also another mode that's basically a high score list, where you can try to beat each other's scores in various challenges that are only listed on the Wi-Fi section. But the Versus mode isn't Wi-Fi, it's only local multiplayer. The Versus mode is okay, not really awesome, but it's okay. It's better than the Secret Rings multiplayer. I really feel that this should have been Wi-Fi. I mean, in Zero Gravity, at least they gave us ghost races. Why wouldn't you want to make the Versus mode Wi-Fi? I mean, it doesn't really make much sense. Like I said, the Versus mode is okay, but nothing special. My final thoughts on this game are, it's vastly underrated. I really find this game enjoyable to play. I do understand why a few people might not like it, as I understand that a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, really despise Waggle Fests. And if you really hate that, I'd advise avoiding this game, but if you're willing to give it a shot, I'd give it a rental. And that's all I really gotta say. I'm done. Have a nice fucking day.